Today, you're going to hear from Dr. Jeff Ling with Evergreen Solutions about what to expect from the study and also some instructions on how you can participate to make sure that we learn about the job that you have and the role that you play. And it's a big part of the outcome in total. So let me just introduce Dr. Jeff Ling.
Thank you, Jack. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming to this orientation session. We have a short PowerPoint to share with you about the study, and we'll also talk a little bit about the job assessment tool, which is a survey we're asking each of you to complete about your job. And I'll show you some examples and some helpful hints in regards to the tool and answer any questions that you have. As we go along, since we are being videotaped, if you have a question for me, you can ask it at any time. I'll repeat the question back to you only so that the video is capturing it. Normally we wouldn't repeat all the questions, but we want to do that so that we make sure that the folks that might watch the video later online have access to your questions also. I want to start off with who is Evergreen. Evergreen is a national public sector management consulting firm, which is a mouthful for basically we're a company that only works with cities, counties, and state governments throughout the country. We've been in business 13 years. We've worked in 45 states in the last 13 years. I've completed about 350 studies of this type in the last 5 years. And so we've completed more than 1,000 studies that relate to compensation classification. Here in Florida, we probably do half of the studies that cities and counties do in regards to compensation or classification or both. We're based in Tallahassee, Florida. All the staff that'll be working with you, not just this week, but as we move forward with the study, are all based in Tallahassee and live here in Florida. We do work with local government, school systems, colleges and universities, as well as state agencies, and on the quasi-governmental side, many of the associations. So there's a fair number of associations that some of you may even, I know the county's a member of, but some of you may be members of, that we do work for: the League of Cities, Association of Counties, the Association of the Court Clerks, the Sheriff's Association. So we're very familiar with the type of jobs and the type of work that's performed at the county level and by many of you. With a study like this, there's two major things we're looking at. The first thing we're looking at relates to internal equity. And internal equity is a term to describe if I perform the same type of work as someone else here in the county, am I compensated in a similar manner? And it doesn't matter if I'm not in the same department or even in the same part of the county. If I'm in one of the constitutional offices versus being on the BOCC side, we'd still be interested in how similar are the pay structures between those and how equitable are they. Internal equity doesn't go down to the level of if someone makes $25.01, the other person has to make $25.01, but they both need to have the potential for earning the same amount of money or be in the same range that they're being compensated. The second piece relates to external equity. And what we're interested in there is if you left the county, if you found a job somewhere else, or you were looking online and decided to apply somewhere else and you were offered a job, would that job pay more? Would that job pay less? Or would it pay roughly the same? And so a key part of the study as well is looking at your external peers and comparing you to your external peers based on both of those pieces of information. So how you compare internally, how you compare externally, we'll be taking a look at how competitive the organization is overall and what needs to be recommended. In some cases, we recommend quite a bit of change. We change the whole structure, the whole system. In others, we simply do some maintenance things or do some updates based on that. At this point in time, we don't know which one it'll be. We're just starting the journey. You're joining us on the first day of orientations, and it'll take us a number of months to get to the point where we've collected enough information that we know what would be the best practices or best alternatives here for the county moving forward. What the study doesn't include is a staffing study. So many times the question comes up, will you be able to talk about how much we work, or if we're overworked or underworked, or how many people we need to have? And no, that's a different type of study. So we won't be assessing performance, we won't be assessing staffing, we won't be assessing workload. We'll be assessing more what are the tasks that you're assigned and what are you performing on a regular basis. Also, many times the question comes up, is there a guarantee for a pay increase? And anytime you do a compensation classification study, employees usually look at it one of two ways. One way being, it's finally my chance to receive that big raise that I'm owed. And the other side is, or the other extreme is, well, the county hasn't done a whole lot in raises, so they're probably not going to do a whole lot this time either. I can tell you that we don't know what the answer will be. But we can't provide any guarantees. There's no guarantee of across the board. There's no guarantee that the recommendations will be implemented. Our job is to collect the information with your assistance and provide it back to the county so the county's leadership can make the best decisions that they can based on that information. What you can expect is it will be very comprehensive. Every employee is included in the study. Every employee will have the chance to fill out a survey. In addition, we'll be communicating with you throughout the process. So this first week, we're here. 5 people will be interacting with employees in orientations like this one that you're attending, as well as focus groups, and there'll be a lot of activity. Then beginning next week, we'll ask you to fill out the survey about your job, the one I'm going to show you in a few moments. That's a whole lot of activity. Then after that piece, your supervisors will weigh in on the information that you provided us, and I'll talk about what they can and can't do related to that. And then after that, we do a lot of work back in our office in Tallahassee. And so you'll be seeing us quite a bit here in the beginning, but many times employees will wonder after the first month, where are those consultants? What are they off up to at this point? And so what we'll be providing you is information related to where we're at in the process, what's happening next, and we'll be working with your HR team to push that information out to you so you know what's going on. How can you participate? And our process is built very, very heavily on your involvement or you playing the role. And part of that is, philosophically, we're firm believers that no one on our team and no one in this organization will ever know your job as well as you do. That you're the expert, and we need your expertise to really help us understand what your job includes. And so attending the orientation session is the first opportunity. You're doing that now, put a check by that box, you've taken care of that. There's also a number of employees that were invited to focus groups. That'll occur over the course of this week. And it's our understanding that supervisors invited some employees to participate in that part of the process. And that process, I believe, starts as early as this afternoon, or maybe it's tomorrow, and goes through the remainder of the week. Every employee will be asked to complete this job assessment tool. And that's the survey about your job that I'll show you the example of. Then anyone that's a supervisor will be asked to provide feedback on what employees provided. And if I'm a supervisor, I'll have the opportunity to complete a management issues tool, which is a fancy name for basically something that allows me as a supervisor to indicate what's working and not working from a comp and class standpoint in my unit. And then there'll be a subset of employees and managers that are selected for interviews. And what this relates to is us following up on the information that you provided us in the JATs, or in the surveys about your job. The JAT is designed to do a whole variety of things. It's critical to our process. It's something we definitely want you to fill out if you don't fill it out. So if you decide that it's not something you want to do or you don't have time, we still need that information. And in many cases, what we'd do to gather that information is either ask your supervisor to help us by providing that information, or we would populate it for you from your job description. Again, you're the expert. Our preference would be you tell us what you do versus us using your job description or using some other supervisor or some other person to help us with that information. What does it tell us? It tells us how work is organized. So that, in conjunction with the actual org charts, would tell us who's really doing what within the county. It helps us understand if you're being paid fairly and competitively today. So even before we collect more data, once we have the JAT, we have a pretty good idea of how fair and equitable the system is from an internal equity standpoint. In looking to the outside market, it helps us to determine from an external equity standpoint, what should the ranges be? What should people be paid in the future? Where should you fall in the range? And then finally, if we do develop a new system, it helps us test that new system for fairness. So we can make sure what we're recommending is better than what you have now, or would address the needs based on what was identified in the study. The JAT is an online tool, and it's available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week once we turn it on. The county is asking that you complete the JAT during work hours. And so no overtime will be paid if you complete the JAT outside of work hours, if you're an employee that would receive overtime. And it does require that you have a computer or access to a computer. We do have a paper process that some of the departments that don't have computers in the field or might not have access to computers, we would be able to utilize that paper process. But our goal is to have as many people use the computer as we can. The reason for that is the computer provides the helpful prompts. It provides you additional information. It helps guide you through the process, where the paper is a sheet of paper you're filling out, groups of sheets of paper that you're filling out. Every employee will receive a unique ID number or a token. And this is a code that has letters and numbers in it, and sometimes symbols, that is unique to each of you as an individual. No one else in Pinellas County will have that token but you. So when that token is generated by our system and sent out to you, you are the only one that has it. If you go to your supervisor and say, hey, I lost my token, what should I do about it? Your supervisor's not going to know. They're going to tell you you have to call us. If you call HR and you speak to someone in HR and say, I don't have my token, what am I going to do about my token? They're going to tell you have to call Evergreen. So there'll be one person at Evergreen that sends out those tokens, and yourself that have access to that unique identifier. Nobody else will have access to that unique identifier. The JAT process will start on Monday the 26th. So 1 week from today, employees will begin overnight receiving emails from Evergreen server, letting them know that their form is ready to be completed. We've done some testing with your IT folks to make sure it'll go through, but inevitably there are usually some hiccups with individual virus protection software on individual machines or anti-spam. So if you don't receive an email by the point in which we've sent them all out, there'll be a communication that comes out from us that simply says, check your email, make sure you received it. We want to make sure it didn't go in the trash bin, or it didn't go in your junk mail, or it didn't end up somewhere else than it was supposed to. We're giving you roughly 3 weeks to complete the process. Now we know the holiday period is in between, and so we recognize that some of you may take time off. The good news is it doesn't take 3 weeks to fill it out. It takes about 20 minutes to 40 minutes to fill it out. So that's the good news. You don't need to worry about, I need every one of those days and I already have a family trip planned. You don't have to set aside more than about 20 to 40 minutes. You can come in and out of the tool multiple times. So with that token, you can go in and out as many times as you want. As long as you're saving your work as you go along, it's saving it for when you go back in again, and it'll be there when you go back in. The supervisors will have the chance to review your answers. They cannot change your answers. They cannot alter anything you did. All they can do is agree or disagree. If they disagree, they have to tell us why. If they do disagree, and it's not in your favor, we'll be contacting you and the supervisor after this period of time to ask you some follow-up questions. So if you receive a call or email from Evergreen about we want to talk, you're not in trouble. It doesn't mean that anything bad has happened. It simply means we're trying to confirm that information that you gave us versus what the supervisor gave us. Employees a lot of times will ask me, well, how often does that occur? Is that 50%? Is that 40%? The answer is it's less than 3% of the time that there's disagreement. So it's a pretty rare occurrence. Keep in mind too, and I'll show you the questions that are on the form, we're not asking you if you like your boss, if you like their hair, if you like what they do for fun. We're not asking you if you like the office and the carpet or anything like that. Nothing that gets you in any kind of trouble or hurt anybody's feelings. All we're asking you about is what do you do on a regular basis, on a daily, weekly, monthly, and yearly basis. The JAT has 5 major sections, and so the software is organized around those 5 sections. The first section is very general. It asks you to describe what you do, and I'll show you an example of that section. The second section is probably one of the most important, because we're asking you to tell us what are the tasks that you perform, or the functions. And then we ask you to answer 5 standardized questions. I'll show you those as well. And then the last 2 sections, one component is about equipment and machinery. What tools do you use in your job? And the last are the physical abilities that you need to possess to sufficiently do your job or perform at the level that you need. Once you click on the link that's in the email, this is the first page that it takes you to. So it takes you here. You'll put in your unique ID right here into the form. And again, that's that token. That's that combination of letters and numbers. Many times folks will ask us, is it something easy to remember? And the answer is no. So it's not car 104 or giraffe 13 or anything like that. It's a jumbled combination of things. And why we make it jumbled, and so folks will ask us, why didn't you make it easy so I can remember it? It's jumbled so someone can't look over your shoulder and see what you're doing and go into your form. And so employees told us over time we want security. We don't want people getting into our form, so we make it where it's not something you could take a quick glance and remember what it is. In addition, you'll confirm your last name. So your last name will be there in that drop down. You'll confirm that that is me. I'm ready to go. And once you tell it that you're ready to go, you'll go to the first sheet. And the first sheet will have the JAT as the first box and the supervisor review as the second. All employees, including supervisors, will fill out the JAT. So everyone will go to that first box first, and if you have direct reports, after the 3-week period, you'll be prompted to go into the second box to do your supervisor review. There's 5 sections that make up the JAT. As I mentioned before, that first one's the basic information, and it starts off with asking you to describe in your own words what you do. It then asks you to categorize the work that you're involved with. It asks you the number of direct reports. It asks you about a number of indirect reports. So it asks you a series of very basic questions about what you do. Then it also asks you to talk about your education and experience. Well, the education and experience not that you possess, but the education and experience that you think someone working in your job should possess. So if you were to win the lottery, or receive your dream job and decide that you're leaving, and you call your boss and say, hey, I'm gone on Friday. And your boss says, well, I don't know who to hire. What level of education and experience do you think they should have? That's the question you're answering here, because we know what you have based on HR's records. What we're looking for is, what do you think it really takes to get the job done? So you don't have to have this level. You may have more. That's okay. No one's being judged. They have it or they don't. This is more, what do you think it would take to get the job done? The same with licenses and certifications. We're asking you to tell us, what certifications and licenses do you think a person needs to have? Maybe you have them, maybe you don't. That's okay. What we're looking for is, what do you think would be in the best interest of the organization, the team, your coworkers, from the standpoint of certifications and licenses. In Section 2, we ask you about the essential functions. So in Section 2, we're asking you to tell us the tasks that you perform. And there's only 4 boxes on here to make it where you can actually see it when it's projected. There's 15 on the actual form. We only put 4 on here so you can actually read it when we project it. And we ask you to tell us the percentage that you're involved in each of these, and to identify the priorities, or the most important. With the percentages, we need them to equal 100. Now, some people will tell us, I work a lot harder than 100%. I work 300%. Where do I get to put 300% in there? And if you're going to put 300% in there, that would be more of a staffing study. That's you showing that you're working above and beyond the normal work week. What we want you to do is think about it as this is a pie. Even if the pie is bigger, you can still cut a piece out of the pie and say what that piece is, or the value of that piece, the percentage that makes up. So what we're looking for is, if it's 20% of your time, even if your time is more than 40 hours, we want to know that you're spending roughly 20% of the effort that you make here at the county on that task or that activity. With the priority, we're asking you to pick the things that you feel like are most important. This is your opinion. Not everyone in your department, even if you're in the same title, are going to pick the same things. Not everyone in the department will list the same task. That's okay. There's many times employees will ask us, should I get together with my coworkers and make sure it all matches? You don't have to do that. You can. There's nothing that stops you from talking to coworkers. But what we're looking for is, what do you really do? How much time do you really spend doing it? And what do you think are the most important components of that work? Then we'll ask you a series in Section 3 of 5 standardized questions. And they're all structured the same way, where at the top it's the most simple, or the least complex, and at the bottom it's the most complex. And I won't read every one of these out to you, but I do want to touch on a few examples out of each. In leadership, it starts off with, I follow specific directions provided by my supervisor and receive feedback on what I do. So that's the least level of leadership a person would have to exercise, because someone's coming to them, telling them what to do, and then checking up on them. Where the most level would be, I determine strategy as well as long-range goals for the organization. I design processes, allocate resources, and report to elected officials or the public. Most employees will fall somewhere between the first and the last. Most of us do tasks that make up something in the middle. And so what you're looking for here is to read through each of the examples first, or each of the descriptions, and pick the description that matches the closest. I cannot say enough. Read them all first. Employees many times come back to us and they say, well, I got about right here. I thought that must be it, and I stopped reading. Where in reality, the one they should have selected is a little bit further down. So read all the options before you make your selection. Same with working conditions. Starts off relatively safe, moves through, I make decisions that could lead to major community or organizational consequences. Same with complexity. I perform specific clerical or manual tasks, through I develop policies, long-range plans, and allocate funds. Where in the middle you'd have the technical and trades, you'd have the entry-level professional, you'd have the professional level, you'd have the higher level technical, scientific, legal, or mathematical concepts. So you're reading through each of those to select the one that's most relevant to your job. With decision making, I perform routine or clearly defined activities under close supervision. Again, I do what I told, I let my boss know when I'm finished, or you might, at the other extreme, I perform work that involves high-level issues, processes, or organizational needs. But again, most people are somewhere in between each of these. Last is relationships, and most of us in government interact with somebody. So it starts off with I work primarily alone, although most of us probably wouldn't check that box. Most of us would at least work with some co-workers or interact with the public or oversee or manage other people, so give instruction. Or I might interact with senior managers, citizens, and elected officials. Again, you're picking the one that's the closest match. And on each of these 5 questions at the bottom, there is an open text box. Now the text box doesn't appear here, again for the sake of making the font bigger or making the spacing better, but in each you'll be able to provide examples that relate to those 5 questions. The examples do not have to be beautifully written. You don't have to write big paragraphs. You don't have to include every detail. What we're looking for is a list of things that you want us to be mindful of or aware of when we look at how you answered each of these 5 questions. With equipment and machinery, we have do you use or repair, do you use, repair, or purchase. You also have a category for do I manage people that use, repair, or purchase. What we're looking, and then within each category, we have everything from copiers to computers to heavy equipment to cranes and bulldozers, to really anything that you might utilize in a job that requires some type of specialized machinery or equipment skills. And like the other 5 questions before, at the bottom there is a box where you can give specific examples. If you're the only person here in the county that can operate the big digger that has to be used to fix water lines, that's where you can put that information in. If you're the person in the GIS function that's responsible for ArcView or ArcInfo or the GIS product that you use, that's where you can include that you have those expertise on that part of the form. With physical abilities, we're looking at what's required to do the job from a physical standpoint. And so any type of lifting, balancing, any type of use of your hands. Also, we would have breakdowns on if long periods of sitting, also standing on your feet for long periods of time. So again, there's many more options than what's present here, but to keep the font a little bit bigger, we've only taken the top of the form to show you today. Probably the most important thing that you can remember when you're sitting down to do your JAT is to click Save. It does not save automatically. So where some websites you go to, if you don't use the website after a certain period of time, it saves it for you. This software does not do that. This software is intentionally set up to not automatically save what you've entered. It wants you to click the button Save. In addition, if I get up and go to the bathroom or take a phone call or a citizen comes to the window and I answer their question, it does time out after a certain period of time. So if you've done online banking or you paid your credit card online or done something where after a while it times out and it tells you on the screen, you timed out, your time is up, you've got to log back in. We have that as well because employees that went through this process in the past said, I don't want anybody to just sit down at my desk and start typing things into my form. And so after a certain number of minutes, it does close out. And when it closes out, it does not save what's on the screen. So every time you finish a section, or you get up and go to the bathroom, or you think I'm going to come back to this later, make sure you're pressing Save. Some of our folks tell people, when in doubt, just click Save. And that's probably good advice to always be clicking the Save button. You can get in touch with us if you have questions or concerns. And we have a person that's in the office, or several people in the office, depending on the day, that they're sitting ready for you to call or email and ask us questions you have about the tool. And those individuals are very well versed in answering the questions that come up in completing the JAT. They can answer technical questions as well as they can answer substantive questions about the form and how to complete the form. And so you can talk to a human being. If it's between 7:30 and 5:30 in the day, in Eastern Time, you're going to get a person that's going to answer the phone. And that person will direct you to someone that can assist you with the JAT. All you would say is, I'm with Pinellas County and I'm working on my JAT. And they'll send you to the appropriate person. You can also email us, and all this information will be present on your form when you first log in. And our goal is to turn around those emails within 4 hours to respond to the concerns that you have. With supervisor review, as I mentioned, the supervisor cannot change answers. It is not physically possible, and I'll show you that form in a few moments. They can only agree or disagree. If they disagree, they have to provide comments, and the supervisor review period will begin literally the week after you finish. So it's right after. This is what it looks like. They'll have a list out of their employees with title that they can click on and open up to review, and they can also complete a management issue tool. Any supervisor that supervises at least one person can complete the management issue tool. Again, that's the form where you tell us, here's some of the challenges we have in our work unit related to compensation and classification. This is the supervisor review, and so this person put down has described their work. I work in an office, they're technical and paraprofessional. They believe someone in this capacity should have an associate's degree, 4 years of experience, and they feel like the only certification you need is life. And so if you've got that, you're set. So if I'm the supervisor, I could take my mouse and click all day long on this and it's not going to do anything. That's literally text on the form that I'm seeing. The only thing I can do is click on agree or disagree and then provide a comment if I disagree. So in this case, the person agreed but provided a comment. So as we go through, and we used a strange or bizarre example, the reason why we included that is this still would result in us contacting the employee and the supervisor. Because the supervisor said they agree with the associates, but they said the master should be required. And so we'd reach out and contact them about why that differential is present in the form. Again, with the supervisor review, the management issue tool can be accessed from there as well. And this is the top of the management issue tool. A supervisor can identify classification or job title issues or compensation and pay grade issues. So you could indicate that the job title is not appropriate. We need to modernize the job title. You could say we need to do something about recruitment and retention. We need to expand the career path. So we need to make sure there's enough levels for someone to move through. The pay grade's inappropriate. We're not paying enough to hire the right people, or other compensation issues they can indicate. So those are the major sections that make up the JAT. Again, the JAT will start next Monday. That's when the launch will occur. You will receive an invitation. You will be the only one that receives the email from us. Your boss won't, your co-workers will receive their own with a unique code. That unique code will take you into the system for roughly 3 weeks. We're asking you to take the time to complete that form. Again, it doesn't take 3 weeks, but we're asking you during that window to complete it. We usually have a lot of people in the beginning and a lot of people at the end. So another word of advice is we definitely want you to complete it, so probably sooner is better than later. So you make sure that you have time to include your information. And after that, we'll look at those results. And if we do have questions or there are disagreements between you and your supervisor, we'd be contacting you. And that's usually over about a 2 to 4 week period after everything's finished that we contact you. Then from there, we'll start analyzing the classification structure, we'll start the salary survey, and we'll start moving into the other phases of the project in the process. So I know that's a lot. I know it's right after lunch. And I know there are quite a few slides that we went over. Any questions you have, anything that you'd like to ask me about in more detail, or we can go back and take a look at again. Yes?
If you've moved into a position and if you've transitioned into a new promotional position and you're training somebody that has replaced you in another position, how do you reflect that on this kind of a thing? So you're doing 2 different jobs, but you're only...
Right. So the question is, if you've moved into a new position and you're training a new person that's come into your old position, how would that be reflected on the JAT? Because we're asking you to give us that information for this snapshot in time. Because we're asking you to fill it out as it is today, not in the past or in the future. You would want to tell us both. You'd want to tell us that, here's my core jobs. You want to include those in the major tasks. But if some of your time is also dedicated to training that replacement, we'd want you to put that in section 2, that you're assisting with the training of that person that's taken on the new position. That would probably not result in your job description changing, because that's part of the succession of the transition that's occurring, but it would make us aware that's part of what your time is dedicated to. And so that would be helpful for us to know when you're especially dividing up that pie, that 100% that you're putting in there. If you're the new person and it's a brand new job, what we're encouraging those folks to do is go to their supervisor or go to the person training them, so if it's the reverse, and ask them a little bit about, okay, where's my job going? What's going to make up my job? And so they're at least aware, but really they're limited too. They can only put what they're doing today and what they understand their job to be today. Because they may not know either on down the road in 6 months what that job may look like, or a year. And so we're asking them to really think about the current or the present. Other questions?
Jeff, I heard
Yes.
from someone that they were asking whether or not they could print out a blank JAT so that they could look at the questions, consider how they would like to respond before they actually log in to complete it. So
That's a great question.
Yeah, we're interested to know.
The question is, can an employee print out a blank JAT before they complete it so they can think about how they want to answer it and put their answers together? And the answer is yes. So they can print the form as a blank form versus a populated form. And they can also print it at each step in between. So if they decide, I've done half of it and I want to look at what I've done so far, they can print a copy at that point. We'd encourage all employees at the end of the process, at the very least, to print a copy to keep for their records. So print a copy of what they put in before they finalize their survey before the due date. Other questions? Who's ready for the survey? You're a quiet bunch. The last bunch was more chatty. Well, since we're doing the video, I'll highlight a few things that came up in the previous, just so you're aware. Maybe you'll think of some questions. In the last group, there were some questions about making sure that everything was included. And we recognize that every little thing you do may not be included in here. And so a follow-up question in one of the groups earlier this morning was, should I start off from my job description or look at my job description first? That's not a bad idea. We're not looking for you to type in your job description into the automated system or into the web portal. But if you want to get your thoughts together, and coming back to Jack's question as well about printing out a copy of the JAT, starting with printing out a copy of the JAT and looking at your job description wouldn't be a bad idea to take a look at, okay, what are the kind of things I want to highlight? If you do something that's not on your job description, so let's suppose it's not included there, it's really important that you do include that, because that's something we wouldn't pick up on from just reviewing your job description. You're telling us that as part of this process, and that'd be important. If you feel like that you do something that takes up a whole lot of your time and no one else in the county does, definitely make sure you're designating that you're including that. I'm spending that percentage of my time doing that task. Another question or concern was, if I don't fill it out during the time period, will there be another opportunity? And right now we don't know. I mean, the goal is to have everyone complete the JAT during the 3-week period. And so we'll be reporting on a daily basis what level of completion there is. And so another group asked, will there be prompts or will there be reminders that come out? And the answer is yes, we will send out reminders. But the degree to which or the number of reminders we send out is contingent on how much complete or how little things are complete at certain points in the process. So there will be multiple reminders, but again, keep in mind the reminder will not have your token or your code in it. You'll have to get that directly from us if you lose that. Several people asked, what happens if I lose it multiple times? That's okay. You'll call that number or email that address, and we'll have to verify your identity. So not just anyone can get your token, but we're happy to provide it because we want to make sure you have it. One of the comments made in the last session is make sure you keep it handy or keep it somewhere where you know where it's at. That's a good idea because it's going to be the same one throughout this part of the process. But again, if you don't or it's missing, we're happy to help with that. We'd rather have you participate than not. Last group had a few questions about how long does it take us to start having an idea of what are we really finding? And the answer to that question is it does take a few months. So going into a process like this one, many times we're asked, what do you think you're going to find? And the answer is we don't know. It takes all these initial steps for us to learn about you before we have a pretty good idea of where you might go in the future. And so it takes literally several months of us collecting data and information about Pinellas County, about your jobs, about what you do, before we have anything that would make up the beginning of the findings. And so the process is not a 1 week or 2 week and we come back and say these are the increases that are going to take place. Another question was, well, among your peers, have we worked with a lot of other Florida counties? And in your area in the last several years, we've worked with Sarasota, we've worked with Manatee, we've worked with Hernando. So we've worked in this area. A number of years ago, I worked with Hillsborough. And it's been a number of years since Pinellas has done a study. And so some of your peers have done studies a little bit more recently, but to the best of my knowledge, none of them are doing major updates right now among those that I named. So they may be doing some tweaking or some minor adjustments, but that was one of the questions from one of the earlier groups also. Yes?
On the percentage part where you're listing, you know, how much time is spent on, what's the best way to reflect something that's only done like once a month or once a week as opposed to something that you do as a daily task? That's
a great question. So how do you reflect something that's once a week or once a month versus a daily? Think about the pie being the whole year. And so there's going to be certain things you might do once a quarter, or you might do once a week during that whole year. So there's 52 weeks in the year. How much does it make up of those 52 weeks that you're only doing it weekly? So if it's a certain percentage of that time, guesstimate what that makes up over the course of the year. With those percentages, you don't have to be scientific or to the decimal place. So sometimes people ask us, well, I think it's 42.5, but it could be 42.6. We're not looking for anything that precise. We're looking for round whole numbers there. So if it is something you only do periodically, that's okay. We expect that there's going to be a number of those kind of things, but think about how that makes up your whole year, or what that makes up in your whole year. Was there another question back here? I got my hopes up. Anything else I can tell you? Or any other questions you have? All right. Well, thank you for your time. I appreciate you coming to the orientation session. And I look forward to seeing you all again as we go through the process. Thank you.
Thank you.